you're filming. Oh, right, off you go. Ah. I just...
I couldn't find it and I clicked on the wrong one.
Excuse me. Actually, it wasn't me. It was mate. Alright, I think it's time for my pills.
It's still filming, is it?
Sorry?
It's still filming.
Yeah. Are you ready? Yep. Yeah. Mm. Oh, chucky bicky today. And a cup of tea. What? Better finish with biscuit. I'll spit it out all over you. Right. Fuselage today. We're having a look at the Puddleduck fuselage, which I haven't finished it yet.
Finished it?
Oh, there's still a bit left, but I won't eat it. Right. I've already made it, the fuselage, so I'll quickly explain what I've done. Again, it's a fairly simple build. It's made basically out of I've used 6mm strip, yeah, six strips cut off a big plank.
Yeah, we showed that in the last video, the bolt system.
That's right. We've got 1/2 inch strips. I set the stripper for 1/2 inch, cut off some 1/2 inch stuff. Yeah, this bit of the front is just a 4 inch wide bit, so it kind of you'll see it on the plan anyway, the shapes that you've got to cut out. Hopefully my lad now will show the photograph of the plan with the first side assembled on the plan. I did this on the plan, pinned down with some nice pins. 1/4 inch is fairly thick, but you don't want to be putting dirty great horrible pins. I've got some dirty great horrible pins which are like, I don't know, I think they use them for sticking things on walls with. They're sometimes okay, but these little very fine pins with a top on it, I think they're Grosvenor's, I can't remember. They're not cheap, but they're worth the investment. You can go through the wood without splitting it, and they're very sharp, and they stick in the top of the work surface.
What, Matt?
Yep. Not the cutting mat, no. Well, they stick in the cutting mat. Anyway, I built, first off I laid down a piece of greaseproof paper on top of the plan. Now, I used to use cling film, but I get in such a mess with cling film, it just ends up in a big ball around my hand. So I don't use that rubbish anymore. I use something you can obviously see through, and it's greaseproof paper. My missus wonder where it keeps disappearing to. It's, we do use a fair bit. So you make the first side, cover it, wait until it's set, obviously wait until the glue's dry, This is all aliphatic resin glue. None of your super glue on this. Then cover it again with another sheet of greaseproof paper and build the second side, which is identical obviously, apart from the back end, which I'll show you in a minute.
Didn't we use cling film for my plane though?
We'll use cling film for yours, but I think we'll
Okay.
we'll switch to this greaseproof
Okay.
if your mum's got enough. We build the second side directly on top of the first side to make sure they're absolutely identical. Okay, so the formers, which you'll see on a photograph which should be on the screen, were actually built up formers. They're built up from 3mm. It's light, and the grain, obviously, as it's built up of 4 separate pieces, on each of the separate pieces is going in exactly the right direction that you want it to be. First time I built up formers like that, it was a pretty good idea. Jim, you need to make absolutely certain at this stage you're not going to build a banana, which I've built a few bananas in the past. So what I tend to do now, I don't have a building jig, I think they're a bit expensive. Might get one perhaps if I do some bigger planes, but what I tend to do is to mark the centre of some of the formers, okay, along the plane with a little pencil mark. Okay, I then draw a very straight line along my building surface and put the fuselage on it. First off, gluing the formers, which are all the same width, which are the front, second, third, fourth. They're all exactly the same width, so that's parallel there, obviously. It's where the centre wing section fits on, that's parallel. Glue those onto the sides of the plane whilst it's sitting on the surface, making sure obviously that they're the right way around, making sure that they're vertical and the whole thing's square, so you can use the square on them. Then comes the point where you have to actually glue and pin the back end together. So the insides of the formers are tapered, so that when you put the two surfaces together and glue them, it gives it a nice big area to glue on. And then I held them together with some nice clamps whilst it glued. But I did that whilst the lines on the formers, which I marked on, were directly above the line on the workbench which I'd put down. I then made certain that that bit of the fuselage didn't move. Can't remember how I did that. I think I stuck something dead heavy on it. And then I brought these the two back bits together, making certain that they were on that line that I'd drawn as well, and making certain at the same time, of course, that they were vertical. So where are we? Have we got enough room here? We've got quite a few squares, so it's a case really of checking all the way along that the construction that you're doing is vertical, obviously, and checking that this end bit here is vertical as well, which it is, which is not bad.
Yep.
Okay. Next part of the construction really is to block in the top and bottom. I blocked in the top with a bit of light ply. The bottom I put in some 3mm ply, because that's where the tail skid's got to be screwed to, so you need something a little bit more substantial than light ply. We then cut out and epoxied in the 6mm thick, which is 2 bits of 3 if you've not got 6, portions that will hold the clamps which the landing gear will fit to. So they're epoxied in, and inside we put some triangles just to make certain that it didn't drop out when it came down like a brick. Right. I also decided, because I'd already bought the electric motor, which we'll come to later on, I also decided to fit in the motor mount in the nose here, bearing in mind of course the angles that it's got to be set at. It's not parallel with the front of the plane, obviously, parallel with the fuselage. It's set at an angle, so you've got a bit of right thrust, and I think it's 5 degrees of down thrust.
If you can try to put it flat, maybe I'd see.
Flat.
Yeah, sort of. You can see that it's slightly off centre.
You see it's off angled off a bit.
Yeah.
Okay. I epoxied that in and put some 6mm plates each side of it, just to make sure it's not going to move anywhere. And then I cut, that was pre-cut obviously, with a hole at the front, as you can possibly see it, for the air to come in underneath, which is going to cool, and there's one in the motor mount as well, to cool the ESC. Right, what do we do after that? We added on the plates. This is going to be a wing which is got to be held on by rubber bands. So we'll have a piece of 6mm stuff. Ooh, 6mm dowel that'll go through there. Pardon me, it's the biscuit. Right, 6mm dowel will go through there. Come out the other side, obviously. Hold the elastic bands, and the same here, which is the back end of the wing. We've reinforced the inside of that with a bit of ply, triangular bit of ply. Okay, so that makes sure that this isn't ripped out when I pull the elastic bands on, and also reinforced it on the back. Marked where the holes are. We haven't drilled them yet, but we've got to do that. So we do that with one of those little handy drills with your hand.
They're handy.
Yeah, that's very handy. Right. Oh yeah, yeah, right. Before we finish, we've done the cutouts at the back for the control rods. Right. It's going to be a pull-pull system for the rudder, which are the two at the bottom, as you can see, opposite each other. So we'll have a servo up here. We'll take the cables down. I've yet to buy the cable. I think fishing line's pretty good for that. Stainless steel coated fishing line. Crimp it on, etc., etc. And we'll have some adjusters on that, obviously. Back to the servo here. Probably cross the lines before it gets to the servo, so that we're feeding straight lines through the arse end. This one here will be for the elevator. Haven't decided quite yet what will make the elevator a pull-pull system as well. Not too certain yet. We'll see how it works. Probably just straightforward horn, I think, on the elevator. So that's done. Again, as I said earlier, the whole construction was put together with aliphatic resin to allow me to be able to, whilst the two sides were on the building surface to begin with, to be able to sand it down with a big, a reasonable sized piece of, don't do it by hand. I sort of, I've got a block which I made up, which is a square block on the back of a big block, and a bit of sandpaper on top of it. So you cover a large surface like that at one time. Cheap and cheerful, works. I think it's about 120 grit I use on that. It don't give a bad finish actually. Once it's covered you won't notice. Couple of things to do yet. Obviously we've got to get the old ripping thingy on the front here to make it look roundy, which is probably the worst bit, isn't it? Don't like sanding. What else we got to do? Oh yeah, drill the holes obviously, and then work out the battery. We've got to put the battery in, we've got to make a battery box for it. Bits and pieces, obviously servo plates, etc, etc.
About 1 minute 44 left.
I think that's about it. Okay, right, now I'll finish off my thing. My missus reckon I waffle. I don't think there was much waffle. Well,
We still got a minute and a half to waffle if you want.
I've got a minute and a half to more. I'm not going to waffle anymore. I'm going to have the rest of my biscuit and a cup of tea. Right, we'll take you through probably the next section will be the wings. What I've done on those, I haven't done much on the wings yet, so you'll be able to follow me on that. I'm making them slightly different from Jim Newbury's design. So hopefully it'll work. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.